You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
What if an appliance emergency didn't have to be? If your appliances need replacing fast, Best Buy has your favorite brands in stock and available now. Learn more at bestbuy.com. Best Buy. Imagine that.
All right, let's get back to some boring subjects.
Understand the risk to our country.
Freedom brings people together.
You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Network. Learn more at wearelibertarians.com.
Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. My name is Chris Spangle. It's so great to be with you today. And we are going to be talking about Afghanistan. This was a fun show to prep. It's nice to get back into, show prep this way about... It's like everybody went back to 2005 politics this week, and it just something felt so normal about it. So, with that being said, we're going to break down what happened in Afghanistan after these words.
Warning. This show is for adults by semi-adults, so the language is sometimes strong and offensive.
I don't know what I said.
Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. Our goal is to help you sound smarter while talking to your friends. If you struggle to understand politics, we explain it from an independent, libertarian point of view. With all of the irreverence it deserves, we toss out the screaming heads, put people before political parties, and give context to the news to make you think. Now, here's our host, Chris Spangle, a 15-year veteran of politics and media.
Hey, welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. It is great to be with you. New day, new time, new experiments in action. And I know, listen, the Chris Spangle Show feed, I love podcasting. I've been doing this since 2007, and I love to experiment. This is my playground, the We Are Libertarians podcast network, where I test everything out, learn lots of things. And so, every 6 months, I do try to do 5 days a week, and then I kill myself, and then after a month or two, I swear I'll never do it again. But we are going to go through that cycle again. Thank you for joining me, and I know that consistency is the most important thing, and that is something that I often fail at in the Chris Spangle Show feed for a variety of reasons, but I want to, I'm doing the History of Modern Politics show, I'm doing the Liberty Explained show, I'm doing the Podcasting a Platform show, and then I do this show, right? Well, they're all me, right? And this is the Chris Spangle Show, so why not put those things in the feed? And so you hear them, because trust me, the numbers here versus the numbers there are much, much different. I was at Podcast Movement, and I figured out that, wow, 2-hour shows really do. I saw some numbers and the impact between am I going to listen to this new show? Because most people have between 7 and 10 shows on their podcast app, and you're fighting to be one of those 7. And the Chris Spangle Show is in that 7 for many of you, and we thank you so much. And for new people who don't give us a chance, that 2-hour mark often is a barrier. So we're going to continue to record on Saturdays, do 2 shows, split our normal show into 2 parts, and air that on Monday and Tuesday. And then Wednesday will be the podcasting show, and the goal of that is to help people build their own media company, build your own platform, start your own podcast. There's never been a better time to get started, launch something, get your voice out there, especially as social media goes away. So I want to teach people how to do what I've done here over the last, 10 years that We Are Libertarians and 20 years in radio and libertarianism. And then Thursday is our Liberty Explained show, where we solicit your questions. So make sure you send us questions at editor@wearelibertarians.com, and we'll answer those in a short little bit. And then the history segment will be on Fridays. So I'm going to interview a lot of cool professors. We had scheduled one person who I don't think is coming today about the fall of Saigon, but we will have something on Friday that is history related. So going to just try this out and see how it goes. I am dangerously close to being a full-time podcaster. And I think that if I am consistent and diligent with this schedule, then I can kind of get over that hump and basically make a living at this. And that is truly astounding to me. And I am so appreciative to the people who listen to our ads, the people who advertise, the people who are in our Patreon, and the people who buy my consulting for podcasting. I for the last year or so, really the last 3, have been on the side doing podcast consulting, helping people start podcasts, running podcasts, and all that income basically has given me a really good. I've been able to pay for a wedding. I've been able to pay for a ring. Been able to pay down a lot of debt. And once I can be debt free, then I'm ready to go here. So, and that doesn't happen without our patrons. You know, I talked about it in our episode at the pool party, but the belief by our patrons, the people who subscribe to Wall Plus, in this network, in building this new institution, because like I always say, don't run for office. Start an institution, start a nonprofit, start a business. I've started a media company, and 50 years from now, when hopefully I'm still around, people will look back and it will be our patrons, the people who have really invested in the growth of this network that have made that possible. And especially our $100 a month members, John Pusilo, Casey Feldposh, Lars Nordskog, Jake Edel, Matthew Durbin, Rhinehold, Christy Avery, and Jason Doolittle. And I would not be able to build an institution without great friends and partners and people that, you know, are on this show week in, week out, that, you know, entertain you, and great co-hosts like Harry Price. Harry, thank you so much for being here. How has your week been?
It's been a whirlwind of a week. Like you said in the opening, it's like it's 2005 again.
It is, right? Like, it's been so confusing because Rhinehold, everybody has political dysmorphia. They don't know where they stand anymore. The conservatives who are like arguing against themselves. Like, I've seen friends who were bloodthirsty neocons and were screaming at me in the 2000s about non-interventionism is terrorism in and of itself. And those people are like, well, why are we still there? Let's get out. Like, and then the Democrats, these Democratic friends that I had that were like, we need to pull out of the war. I'm anti-war. Now they're like, send in the troops. It's very, very confusing for people because this war has lasted so long that people's opinions on it have shifted to the other side.
Well, and it's not so much that they shifted. It's more a case of, I think a lot of times it's like, what are our enemies saying? And let's take that opposite position. Right. So as soon as the positions start to shift, everybody sees that and jumps the other way and tries to point out where the other people are wrong. So they paint themselves into these positions that are basically hypocritical on their own side, like their own, what they've said before. But it's, you know, everybody has short memories. So everybody just does what they want to do. Yeah. Well, you got into that by pointing out who voted for the war and who didn't, and some very.
It turns out that Barbara Lee was right.
Dedicated people, yeah, some very dedicated people didn't like that you pointed that out. But
I unfollow my own posts, so I'm totally unaware what anybody said. But listen, when it comes to non-interventionism, my own personal history. It goes back to 2008 and the Ron Paul campaign in 2007. I think everybody was influenced by that. I was very libertarian while I was a Republican, and that was the one piece because, I turned 18 2 days before 9/11. It was a profoundly impactful day for me. It was, I think everybody at the time agreed that we should go into Afghanistan in one form or another. And it wasn't so much of what's going on with like the vaccine debate and the pandemic and the intensity of it and the social pressure. If a lot of people are in the situation where if they get the vaccine, then their anti-vax family is going to disown them. And if they don't get it, the other side's going to disown them. It's highly polarizing and people kind of, it's incredibly there's a lot of social engineering going on. And
it's polarizing because people want it to be. That's how they're trying to make political gains, is by setting people at each other at an emotional level so that they don't have to think about it.
Yeah, and so this is the only other time in my life where this aggressive feeling of social pressure, right, existed was during that time period after 9/11. I mean, I think it was September 18th when the AUMF, the Authorization of Military Force Against Terrorism, was passed September 18th, 7 days after. And only I think it was the Authorization for Military Force in Afghanistan. I'm don't want to say it was the same vote, but only Barbara Lee voted against it, a Democrat from California. Ron Paul voted for it, right? And that tells you, I think, how intense the pressure was at the time to go into Afghanistan. Now, long story short, you get to the debates, and I see Ron Paul talking about non-interventionism, and it was incredibly impactful to me. I'm the guy who put together a pro-war rally, and I wonder if I have it publicly available. I don't think I have, because people who don't listen to this show, who have an opinion of me that is usually just it may be. Let's see. Just
like that. Oh, you said the photo with you on stage with all the people around you.
Yeah. I was kicking anti-war protesters off the stage. Yeah, it's unlisted. You guys can't see it unless I show it to you. Okay. But yeah, I was very, very pro-war. Woo! Sorry, that's Shenandoah. This was the logo that we had designed for it. I was the College Republicans president at the time, and we were just trying to do something nice for the troops that were already in Afghanistan. Guy put together a video for it. It was... Let me turn this down here a little bit. It was a pro-war rally, but it was a Thanksgiving for the troops. This is the day after Thanksgiving. It's a support rally on the Monument Circle in downtown Indy in 2003. Andy Horning spoke at it, a mentor of mine. Let me see if I can find my silly, goofy self. But you see, it was a big production. Mothers of the military.
You can see your head popping in the background.
We had congressmen. That's Larry Borst, who was a state legislator. All the Republicans wanted to speak at it. We had Sammy Davis there. Here's me.
Karen and Amy, I realized that this is more for the families who are here today. They sacrifice a lot, and none of us, if we don't have family in the military, can't understand the agony that they go through on a daily basis.
Look how fat I was.
I want to thank the Wright brothers for the fantastic music they're providing.
So it was a big production, and it was. I'll put it in the show notes, the unlisted video, so you can watch it and check it out. And it was. I will say, I am very proud of it in the respect, in the way that Indianapolis was all lit up for Christmas at the time. We had taken these videos and put them on VHS tapes and DVDs and sent them to troops in care packages, several hundred copies, and got many great letters from soldiers saying, you have no idea how homesick I am and how great it was to get to see the city at Christmas time, and we really appreciate it. So I am very proud of that, even if the sentiment behind it was mostly wrong. So yeah, Harry's right. Thank God you grew the beard. But when you were in the military, Rhinehold, I don't know if you were a non-interventionist at that point. After 9/11, it was very difficult not to want to go get the bastards, and whatever way we're going to do that, let's do it.
Right. So I was non-interventionist long before 9/11. I think
as many soldiers are. The number one group of likes on our 100,000 person Facebook page is veterans.
Right. So, I identified as a libertarian in the early 90s. That's when I first heard about what libertarianism was. I realized, that's
when did
what
you stop?
So I kind of had come to my own conclusion of what I remember saying to somebody. I said, I just want the government to leave everybody alone. Just protect us from hurting each other, but otherwise leave us alone. And somebody said, it sounds like libertarianism. So I went and looked it up, and that's, kind of where I started my journey there. So I was doing political writing at the time. So I switched over and started doing more writing about libertarianism during that period. So leading up to 9/11, I was very much anti, intervention. I remember the first Gulf War and how that came about and everything. So I was kind of against all that and some decisions that were made there. But I actually wrote an article defending 9/11 and the decision to go to Iraq. Right. And what was funny about the time, too, is that I remember right after the attack and people were talking about what we're going to do. And Bush said he wanted to go to Afghanistan because that was where the Taliban ban was. And that's where all this was kind of developed from or planned from. And they were giving them protection. So let's go there and get those guys. And the Democrats at the time, one of the Democrat senators, and I don't remember the name, I need to go look it up. But he said that we're going to give him one. We'll give him one war. And so they all agreed to support the Afghanistan. So when he started to go to Iraq, of course, that's when the Democrats were like, no, you can't go there.
Yeah, and
right?
they were
just as much justification. Just as much justification to go to Iraq that there was Afghanistan. But it's the Democrats who said, nope, that's enough. We gave you one. You're not getting another one.
Yeah, I mean, Darla rightly says Biden voted for the war in Afghanistan as it was 98-0 and like 425-1 in the decision to go to Afghanistan. It was much more controversial to go to Iraq. But Biden voted for the war in Afghanistan, but said whenever we ended the Afghan war, it was going to end badly. So Biden voted for a war he always knew was going to end badly. He was head of the Council on Foreign Relations at that point. He was head of a Senate Armed Forces Committee at the time. Famously didn't really hold any hearings pushing back on the invasion of Afghanistan. But somewhere along the way became one of the more rabid anti-war Democrats. And if you read Barack Obama's autobiography, Ryan Lindsay told me this. I didn't read it. But it basically says, like, and I remember this at the time, like Biden and Obama were on the outs because Obama wanted to greatly escalate and have another surge in Afghanistan, and Biden was really against it. And Scott Horton gave a fantastic interview. It's in the show notes for this. Talking about this interview and book, these burn pits. If you watch The Outpost, like if you're going to watch one movie, there's a couple movies. I recommended one that's like Brad Pitt, like War or something. War's in the title, but it's on Netflix, and Brad Pitt plays this general, and it like shows the dysfunction of why this didn't work so well. But The Outpost shows what it's like for these soldiers in Afghanistan at the time. Fantastic movie, but they're burning feces, they're burning their trash. And one of the guys says, this is going to be the Agent Orange of this war. It's going to give us all cancer, burning all these polycarbonates and all this junk. And he was right. And Joe Biden's son was in Iraq around these burn pits, and that is what is believed to have given him the brain cancer that killed him. And so, when Joe Biden comes out this week and sounds like Ron Paul, I mean, listen to this. Let me pull it up here on the shared screen so the folks on YouTube can see it. When he says this, I mean, he sounds like Ron Paul in 2008.
How many more generations of America's daughters and sons would you have me send to fight Afghanistan's civil war when Afghan troops will not? How many more lives, American lives, is it worth? How many endless rows of headstones at Arlington National Cemetery? I'm clear on my answer. I will not repeat the mistakes we've made in the past.
I mean, he was so dead on with that. I mean, he was... parts of that speech are really good.
How much is what happened to his son playing into that too? He's had to go through that grief, right? So he feels that like more on a personal level, because that's one of his big motivations in life is his family and his son. So so I know that he had a big thing with Obama. They fought all the time about this. He wanted everybody out of Afghanistan, and everybody knew going in it was going to be bad. It wasn't just him. Everybody knew we were never going to get out clean, because we saw what happened to Russia when they did it. Why are we repeating that mistake? That was the big argument at the time, and they decided we were going to go do it.
Yeah, so we're going to take.
Everybody was still flushed a little bit from the first Gulf War about how easy that was. Yeah, it seemed to be, because we were leading up to that war. It was the comments that Iraq has the fourth largest army. This is going to be a bloodbath. We're going to have a lot of debt, and then we just went in there and just
It was days, wasn't it?
And, yeah, it was like 40 days or something like that. We bombed them so much that they were just giving up.
My fiance is 27. I'm 37. Nice. It is impossible for me to explain to her what life was like before 9/11 because she was 8. It is impossible for the three of us to explain to these kids what life was like before the War on Terror, before PRISM, before taking your shoes off at the airport, before, it's the psychology before that was we were invincible. We defeated the Soviet Union. We had defeated Saddam Hussein in days. And then these hillbillies from Kabul or places we've never heard are going to come over here and blow up our towers. We're going to mop the floor with you. We're the sole superpower. Go ahead,
just trying to tell people that our airports were more like malls here in America. Like you could, like especially the Indianapolis one, like it was basically part of this a Simon Mall. I remember going there as a teenager on the bus, get there, hang out at the airport, watch planes going off, and go to and shopping there.
Getting on the airplane was like getting on the airplane was like getting into the State Fair or a concert. Now you just walked through a metal detector, and when you went to the State Fair, you didn't have to go through a metal detector.
Yeah, and you didn't really have to at the airports when I was growing up, right? So that's kind of a newer thing too. You used to be able to go to the actual gate and see people off.
Yeah,
you didn't have to have a ticket to get past a certain area. It was just a whole different time. I grew up at the end of the Vietnam War.
Damn.
And
Kevin Hart
then
throwback.
It was just years and years of peace. And I remember when I was in the Navy that there was a big push by Reagan at the time to revamp our military, revamp our Navy, and make it stronger again because we had kind of tailed off a little bit on building that part of the military branch up because we didn't need it. So that was kind of a big push at the time, but it was still less than what we saw. It was still a time of peace. It was still relatively peace. I mean, we still had these things happening, the coal and the Beirut and all that stuff was going on, but it was never, like a big war engagement like we have now. And it's just sad to see for 20 years, just sitting there watching this happen.
Yeah.
And people just don't remember what it was even like. So it's their normal.
Yeah.
It's sad to me.
So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to give you kind of the lead up to the war in Afghanistan and kind of how we got into Afghanistan before we start talking about the Doha Agreement and everything that's happened this week.
You can play outside longer if you wear sunscreen. You can fly higher on a half-pipe with a helmet. And you wouldn't jump out of an airplane without a parachute. Your finances are no different. Protecting your future allows you to go after your goals more aggressively. Explore this unique perspective beside an agent with the backing of New York Life. Insurance, investments, retirement, and more. Visit NYL.com to learn more. Investments are offered through registered representatives of NyLife Securities, LLC. Member FINRA SIPC, a New York Life company.
Welcome back to the Chris Spangle Show. We are talking about the before the Forever Wars. We're talking about how we got into Afghanistan. Trying to help you get the context. I know many of you, and when we had a live show on 9/11 years ago, and Dakota was on. Dakota's in his early 20s still. That's how young he was, and he didn't even know. We asked who attacked us on 9/11, and he goes, Saddam Hussein. Right? Like he didn't have any clue. He didn't even, people don't. Harry, your mic just gets like super loud sometimes. It's really weird.
Oh, I think it's. Hold on, I know what it is. I apologize. It's the dock. I apologize.
Get your dock under control, man. So I don't think people have any idea what like the Taliban is or who they are or what happened. So we're going to kind of go through a little bit of history and kind of give you some understanding of the lead up to Afghanistan, what the war was like, why. What kind of happened, and then tomorrow we're going to go into what happened this past week and the failure that was this entire thing. So, the Taliban and this is part of Wikipedia here. The Taliban, which refers to itself as the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, they're a militant organization that operates solely in Afghanistan. And they emerged in 1994, taking advantage of the power vacuum that was left following the aftermath of the Afghan Civil War. So the Soviet Union comes in and occupies Afghanistan. The Americans drew them into Afghanistan as a way to... So part of what Reagan's strategy was in defeating the Soviet Union was to get them to spend. So he increased military spending, increased all these actions around the world, trying to get us into kinetic warfare to draw in the Soviet Union, because basically to bankrupt them. And it worked, and they drew them into Afghanistan, and the army fighting the Soviets were funded by the Americans. Watch Charlie Wilson's war, and they funded the Mujahideen. One of the biggest backers and generals of the Mujahideen at the time in the 70s and 80s was Osama bin Laden, son of an oil billionaire, and they were fighting with American weapons against the Soviet Union. When they withdrew in the mid 80s, the Soviet Union collapsed 2 years later, and so then there's a fight. They just leave, and the country collapses into a civil war, and the Taliban is a group that is kind of formed out of that, trying to take advantage of that power vacuum. And the group was mainly composed of Afghan religious students who studied in Afghan madrasas as well as Pakistani madrasas during their time as refugees, and who had fought in the Soviet-Afghan War under the leadership of Muhammad Omar. Now, Al-Qaeda is different than the Taliban. They're not the same. Taliban operate, you have different groups. Afghanistan is a country, but it is not a country in the cohesive way that we think of, right? Like, Avon is next to Plainfield, is next to Brownsburg, which is next to Speedway, is next to Indianapolis, but we're all kind of the same, right? In Afghanistan, it's an incredibly mountainous country. You have tribes. For instance, when the Americans invaded in 2002, there are famous stories basically of soldiers going to tribal people and the tribal people think they're Russian, because they had not heard that 15 to 20 years earlier the Russians had left. So they just assumed the Russians were still in the country and these Americans were Russians. Translators had a hard time because they were never... you'd have to know 25 different dialects for anybody to talk to each other. So it's it's a patchwork of tribal villages. It's not a cohesive country, which has been a big reason. But Al-Qaeda is an international terrorist group that was started by Osama bin Laden out of the Mujahideen, basically to fight the Americans, the American presence in Saudi Arabia specifically. So when Dennis and his friends go into Saudi Arabia... So when Saddam Hussein of Iraq invades Kuwait, which is this oil-rich country just south on the Saudi Arabian peninsula, Osama bin Laden goes to the emir of Saudi Arabia and says, let the Mujahideen fight, fund us, we know how to fight, we're well-trained, if you let the Americans in here, they will never leave. The 3 American bases that were set up after the Gulf War in 91 and 92 are still there. He was right. That's a major reason why he turned his sights towards the American government. And they had networks all through Africa and the Middle East and cells around the world. And The Looming Tower is a TV show that you can watch on Hulu that kind of breaks it down. The book by the same name is great. Ali Soufan is a great author on this. All those books and all that stuff's in the show notes and the PDF for you to check out. But Al-Qaeda was able to host bases, training camps within Afghanistan. So when the September 11 attacks happen under Bush, they go to the Taliban and say, hand over Osama bin Laden. And the Taliban, I mean, they're not just going to hand him over, right? They have deep ties and affiliations to Osama bin Laden, even if they are separate groups. They're not just going to hand him over to the United States. So they say, we want proof. And so that just ticked off George Bush. And this comes from Democracy Now! As they give a little bit of a brief history lesson as to what happened next.
Turn now to look at the roots of what's become America's longest war. The U.S. invaded Afghanistan October 7, 2001, less than a month after the al-Qaeda attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Within days of the U.S. bombing of Afghanistan, the Taliban offered to hand over Osama bin Laden, the al-Qaeda leader. But the Bush administration rejected any negotiations with the Taliban. This is Bush's press secretary, Ari Fleischer, responding to a question in October 2001.
Would you go so far as to say that no matter what the Taliban might say at this point, it may not make any difference? Are you ignoring whatever they may say?
The president could not have made it any clearer 2 weeks ago when he said that there will be no discussions and no negotiations. So what they say is not as important as what they do, and it's time for them to act. It's been time for them to act.
In December of 2001, just a month or two later, the Taliban offered to surrender control of Kandahar if its leader, Mullah Muhammad Omar, would be allowed to, quote, live in dignity in opposition custody. U.S. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld rejected the offer.
If you're asking, would an arrangement with Omar where he could, quote, live in dignity in the Kandahar area or some place in Afghanistan be consistent with what I have said? The answer is no, it would not be consistent with what I have said.
That's Donald Rumsfeld speaking December 6, 2001.
So that leads America to invade with Operation Enduring Freedom. And then let's jump to Scott Horton, his book, Enough Already. And The Fool's Errand is the one to start with, and then Enough Already. Scott Horton is like the best on this stuff. He's followed this stuff forever. He's very meticulous in how he writes things. And I've never interviewed him because he's interviewed on every single libertarian podcast like every other week. But I'd love to talk to him but his best interview that I think he's ever done was just with Reason Magazine's Nick Gillespie. And it was really thorough and really worth your time listening to get a full perspective, not just on the history, but also what happened this week and what's going on with China and other global players, and definitely encourage you to go to antiwar.com, check out Scott Horton, go to the Libertarian Institute and listen to Scott Horton's podcast, and just that one. The rest, avoid. No, foreign policy. What's the one that Trisha always recommends to me, guys? Foreign policy. I don't know. It's really good, too. He does a good job. But Scott Horton... this is a little bit of a longer clip, but he gives kind of some more context to how why Osama bin Laden attacked us and what happened in the days following that.
Make about the reason, we have obviously the motive of al-Qaeda, who, came out of the Mujahideen that the Carter and Reagan administration had backed against the Soviets in Afghanistan in the 1980s. They were turned against us by the policies of Bush and Clinton in the 1990s, Bush Sr., and Bill Clinton in the 1990s, even though Bill Clinton kept backing them anyway, like in Chechnya and Kosovo. But then, they were turned against us, especially first and foremost, because of the American bases in Saudi Arabia being used to continue the blockade and the bombing against Iraq there. And that was the number one cause, and there are others. But anyway... but then and
just to put a point on that, that was when Bush said they hate us. George W. Bush said they hate us for our freedom. It was actually, plausible that al-Qaeda hated us because we had bases in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, sure, and in fact,
and elsewhere throughout the world.
Yeah, the most important thing that you can do is just read Osama bin Laden's declarations of war from 1996 and 1998. The first one is called Declaration of War Against the Americans Occupying the Land of the Two Holy Places. Not subtle. And both of them. And then there's the letter to America that the Guardian published in early 2002 explains all this as well. the motive, and in fact, there's a very authoritative source, especially for right-leaning national security type folk who might be listening to this, is the former chief of the CIA's Bin Laden unit, Michael Scheuer, who's a very conservative guy and the former head Bin Laden hunter at the CIA. And he said, look, these guys are religious radicals. Of course, they are the leaders of Al-Qaeda, but they don't hate us for who we are or because of who they are. They hate us because of what we do. And in fact, Scheuer's thing was, as a CIA analyst, he would be like a very objective, neutral reporter, and at least sometimes, and say, listen, if you still want to continue these policies, that's fine. This is a democracy. Talk about it, vote on it, keep the policies. All I'm saying is you need to understand these policies are what's driving the terrorists' war against us. Just simple as that. And very quickly, it's the bases in Saudi to bomb and blockade Iraq, support for Israel in their occupations of Palestine and at that time also of Lebanon, support for all the kings and dictators and sultans and El Presidentes of the region, pressure on them to keep oil prices artificially low to subsidize our economy at their expense. And then, as they accused, turning a blind eye to Russian, Chinese, Indian, and Uzbek oppression of Muslims, which, as I was saying before, isn't really true because Bill Clinton was backing the Mujahideen against the Russians in Chechnya and against their friends, the Serbs in Bosnia and in Kosovo. And he was also backing Uyghur fighters against China. So, in fact, after September 11th, Bill Clinton and two of his Democratic allies from the House, Brad Sherman and Tom Lantos, all three of them said something like, how could the Muslims attack us after everything that we've done for them lately? But the thing was, the 6 major reasons that they were targeting us were all still in play. And the fact that we had backed them in Kosovo did not bribe them off. But here's the real point. I'll try to wrap this up quick. Is that, so that's their motive. But the strategy was to bait America into making the same mistake that the Russians had made and invade Afghanistan, to bog us down, bleed us to bankruptcy, and force us out the long way and the hard way. This was the American deliberate policy against Russia. We'll give them their own Vietnam. That's not just in Rambo 3. That's Zbigniew Brzezinski, Walter Slocum, and Robert Gates in the Jimmy Carter years. So this is the reason we want to back the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, is to provoke the Russians into invading. Then we'll bog them down and give them their own Vietnam, just as we had just suffered through, and see how they like that. And then, of course, as we all know, the popular history is this is one of the straws that broke the camel's back and helped bring down the Soviet Union, along with the oil price crash of the late 1980s there. Well, the Mujahideen had learned that same lesson, including the Arab Afghan army had learned that same lesson as the Reaganites and said, yeah, we did that, right? And then they decided they're going to do the same thing to us again. And so when George Bush decided we're going to go to Afghanistan and stay, he was doing exactly what bin Laden wanted him to do. When then he went to and took out the socialist infidel, as bin Laden called him, Saddam Hussein in Baghdad, that was, as Michael Scheuer called it, a hoped for but unexpected gift to bin Laden, that he would turn Iraq, at least Western Iraq, became Jihadi University. Now then, if that's true, which it is, then when Obama went to Libya and then to Syria and helped even to inadvertently, they weren't really going for this, create the Islamic State Caliphate that ended up invading and taking control over all of Western Iraq from 2014 through 2017. This is all Osama bin Laden's wildest dreams. Remember in the Bush years, Glenn Beck would threaten us with the Islamo-fascist caliphate. But then you look at a map and you go, well, where is it? Because there's all nation states in the way. There's no caliphate. Well, Bush's Iraq war and Obama's Syria war created the caliphate of bin Laden's wildest dreams and Glenn Beck's nightmares. All of that is all, as they say in soccer, own goal, right? None of this had to happen at all.
So obviously you see solid interview there, great stuff. And so, you know, in the early weeks of the invasion of Afghanistan, I remember somebody was telling me they were in Afghanistan. They were a soldier, and they're like, we flew in with a bunch of F-16s, and Horton alludes to this in the first chapters of his book. Flew in there with our F-16s, blew up everything that was Al-Qaeda, and we could have left. We could have walked away at that point. And the numbers of Al Qaeda in Afghanistan went from thousands to like filling two school buses. So you have no real justification for that long-term nation building idea. And you have successive administrations like George Bush, surges in Afghanistan. When Barack Obama, even though he runs on an anti-war platform, gets in and increases the amount of troops in Afghanistan. Trump, when he gets into office, it increases it to, I think it was 12,000, 15,000 troops in Afghanistan, drops the mother of all bombs. So successive presidents kept trying to rebuild this country. And so you have basically, but there's one scene that just is perfect in capturing exactly why this project did not work, why we should not have been there for 19 years because it was a fool's errand. And it's in Obama's War, a documentary by PBS and Frontline. And just watch these guys. You have basically two sides, young soldiers and tribesmen in Afghanistan trying to communicate to each other to fulfill the needs or orders, basically, of the Taliban and the American military. And notice the general that talks in this. The guy that put this plan together, Michael Flynn, thinks Hillary Clinton eats babies. So obviously we weren't coming with our best. So check this out. This is from Frontline.
All the shooting makes it harder for the Marines and the people to trust one another.
All right, well, I know there's no problems, but you're still going to see the Marines around here like every day, every other day.
And with a translator who doesn't speak the local dialect or English very well.
Say that over again.
The simplest communication seems impossible.
Haven't gone where during fighting? Haven't gone where during the fighting?
They haven't gone to, sir.
Gone where? You're not telling me where. Where have they gone?
They haven't gone to from here. They haven't
gone from where? Gone where from here? Where?
Frustration steadily grows.
So now it's over there. They just said it was over there.
Yeah.
The Marines are here to try to find out why some locals have moved out of their homes.
Why are people afraid to come back to their house?
So
now they can come back. They know that.
So they fear fighting between the towns. So the villagers are basically saying we don't go to the other market because we don't want to get killed by the Taliban.
Right, people can start coming back. We want people to come back to their homes and start farming again. Hey, has anybody shopped at the market lately?
The villagers start laughing. We buy our flour from another bazaar. It's a faraway place.
They're going to Lockery.
Why are you going to Lockery? The market right here is open.
It's also Taliban told, if you go to bazaar, we will kill all of you.
So you were told the Taliban's going to shoot you if you go to the market. Who told you the Taliban was going to shoot you if you go to the market? Who told you all you'd be shot if you go to the market?
How well do you think your Marines understand counterinsurgency doctrine?
They understand how important it is to win the population. They understand that. It's sometimes difficult with the Marines to rein them back.
Now I'm going to ask this question for the 5th time. Hey, ask him to stop. Ask him to stop. I'm going to ask this question.
What I try to tell the Marines all the time is the guy that you are nice to today is going to be the guy that doesn't shoot at you or another Marine 2 rotations
That's
from
an
now
on-the-ground commander.
They didn't answer my question. Listen to me for a second. Listen to me right now, all right? You all are not cooperating.
This is a war about personal relationships. It has to be a cultural shift in how we think about what we're doing. This is how we will win this war. This is how we will succeed.
I need you all to answer my questions. If not, then I'm going to believe right now that the Taliban does come here, they talk to you, you talk to them, and you're still on their side. All right? You need to understand that we are here to keep the Taliban out.
Translator saying is, we're here to kick the Taliban out. Why aren't you helping us? They all start laughing and say, what can we do? What can we provide for you? You have planes and tanks and guns. We're simple people with nothing. We don't even have a sword. If you can't win, then how can we? So you've got these generals who, are in the Washington, D.C., like Flynn, saying, oh my, it's personal relationships that will win. And then you've got this 22, 23-year-old kid condescendingly talking down to these villagers, yelling at them, saying, we're here to help you. What do you want us to do? They're going to kill us if we help you. And so this is why, Rhinehold, the Taliban, as of last year, they had 61% of the country. Even General Petraeus at one point says, yeah, the people on the ground prefer their sense of justice, their organization, than the completely corrupt government that we upheld. I mean, it's very clear what happened and why. And you see it in, and I'm going to find the name of that movie with Brad Pitt, because it's based on Stanley McChrystal and Michael Hastings, who died in that mysterious car accident. And he gave an interview in Rolling Stone. He was embedded with General McChrystal during this time period. And he basically, McChrystal was like, Obama doesn't know what he's doing. This is not working. He basically exposed to this reporter exactly what was said, and then they fired him for cursing. So they've justified a reason to fire McChrystal, and then the cycle just kept repeating. And the Afghan government was completely corrupt. You had Karzai, who had all kinds of Swiss bank accounts and just was funneling money. The military, towards the end of the collapse here, had ghost soldiers. So it's like in The Sopranos when they're doing no-bid jobs and hey, you need to give Paulie 3 employees on that construction site, fake names to pay so he can get 3 salaries from that job. That's what was happening over there. You had the heroin smugglers. Right. Go ahead, Rhinehold.
Well, that's where all our money was going. I remember the big days when they first had the vote for the government in Afghanistan. What was that, 2005, 2006 maybe, where they all had the blue finger, remember?
Yep.
Yeah, 6.
And that was going to be the turning point. We were going to be able to get out of Afghanistan. They have their own government now. We've got Karzai's in place. He was elected. And then they just saw where they could make a bunch of money and suck America dry, because we were willing to do that. We were in a position. We had gotten into a position where we couldn't just leave, because they would say, well, we wouldn't be able to defend ourselves against the Taliban. We don't have enough military might. We don't have enough manpower. We need to build that. So we just invested so many resources, not just the people that we were sending over there and getting killed and maimed and put in situations where they had so much stress, PTSD or PTSD, where they were killing themselves. That's been a huge epidemic from this war. It's
been an enormous problem this week, because you talk to friends who are soldiers and they're like, is my friend alive? Are they going to make it? They genuinely loved the people that were their translators or that helped them, fellow Afghan soldiers from the military. And they're now, in grave danger. And that's just been an added layer of trauma that probably could have been prevented if the exit had been done better.
Differently.
Go ahead, Harry.
Yeah, differently. Even Biden himself, this was going to be chaotic, and everyone knows it was going to be chaotic. Everyone knew this was going to happen, but for some reason they couldn't foresee it to happen that quickly, and that you could have done different things to we're gonna. It was more of the planning, and you see a lot of the generals are we had different plans, and this is the plan they went with. But everyone knew this was eventually going to happen. China knew, everyone was knew eventually the Taliban was going to take back control of Afghanistan, but no one knew how fast and how chaotic it was going to be. And it's not even how you say it's only that chaotic as people may even make it out to be, even out right there on the floor. The Taliban is not really right now just butchering people. Butchering people. They're more just telling you got to get the heck out. You need to leave.
Yeah.
The bad part is that I think a lot of their planning and thought process was under the impression that they just misunderstood what was going to happen, what the reaction to of the Afghan people is going to be, because they see the United States leaving, and I think the leadership and even the past administration felt the same way, probably, that once we leave, they'll be able to stand up for themselves, and they'll at least put up some sort of fight to keep their country. And they didn't. They just rolled over. And it's a lesson they did not learn from Vietnam, where the same thing happened, where as we started pulling out, a lot of the South Vietnamese military defected because they knew they were going to get overrun, and they wanted to be on the good side, the side that was going to win, because they didn't want to get tortured and killed for being part of the enemy. So we and it was a great podcast yesterday from Bruce Carlson on the My History Can Beat Up Your Politics podcast, where he details some of that.
Who will be with us on Friday, by the way.
Right. And one of the great things that came out that I heard in that was one of the interesting things I heard about that was that they had planned to take off on planes out of Vietnam, and a defecting South Vietnamese officer or pilot dropped his payload on the runway and destroyed it.
Yeah,
as he was flying over to defect,
and he wanted to do it to get in good. He wanted to get in good with the people that were about to take over his country. They actually had Operation Baby Lift, they had Operation New Life, they had Operation Fresh Wind. They had multiple operations, but we're going to get into the fall of Saigon and the parallels there in the episode on Friday, and we're going to talk more about the disaster that was this past month in Afghanistan, and what are we to think about it? Even though we are opposed to the long war, and we are opposed, and we were for exiting Afghanistan, what happened? Could it have been done differently? And we will talk about that tomorrow. So please stay tuned here on the Chris Spangle Show. Thank you for listening. And if you got some value out of this, please share it with your friends. We're not trying to make you mad. We're just trying to make you think here at the Chris Spangle Show. We'll see you tomorrow.